And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. We are so honored to be affiliate partners for General Michael Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. The DVD can be purchased from several popular retailers, and he's on tour screening and promoting the film. If you'd like to support General Flynn and the State of Freedom, visit freedomstate.us to get your copy of the DVD, to buy Flynn movie merchandise, or purchase tickets to a live screening. Our affiliate link is also in the show notes. Well, today we have a big recap of what happened last week and a look at the very hectic and important week ahead. A snapshot, but a sizable snapshot of what's happening. Before we get into the bills, let me read the scripture of the day. It is Joshua chapter 24, verses 15 to 16 and 23 to 24. It says, "If it seems wrong in your eyes to serve the Lord, then make your decision today which gods you will worship, the gods which your ancestors worshipped in Mesopotamia, or the gods which the Amorites worship in the land where you're now living. But I and my family, we will give our lives to worship and Yahweh." The people responded enthusiastically, "Far be it from us to abandon the Lord and serve other gods. Our God, the Lord, set us and our fathers free from slavery in the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. He performed these many great signs and wonders before our eyes. The Lord supernaturally protected us throughout our entire journey as we passed through the territory of other nations. And as we advanced, the Lord powerfully drove out from before us all the people, including the Amorites who inhabited the country. Yes, Joshua, we too will worship and serve the Lord, for he alone is God. Now then, said Joshua, throw away these foreign gods that are among you, and yield your hearts fully to the Lord, the God of Israel." And the people promised Joshua, "We will really worship and serve our God, the Lord, and listen to his voice." We are living in a choose this day whom you will serve time. For those who have eyes to see what's happening in the world, it has become increasingly clear that we're in the midst of a spiritual war between good and evil. Let me encourage you to make sure that there's no mixture in your heart, no mixing Christianity with other religions like New Age and Buddhism. That's becoming pretty common. And the Bible says that the Lord alone is God. The Lord is one, and there's none like him, and there's none beside him. Our God is a consuming fire, so don't try and mix or add anything else to your commitment, practice, and service to him. He won't have it. And another kind of idolatry to be warned against is exalting anything above God in your own heart, like money or success or your reputation. This is a time to purify ourselves and serve the Lord alone, to exalt him, his name, and his word above everything else. The Bible says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these other things, these lesser but good things, will be added to you." He will be faithful to reward your pure and faithful seeking of him.
You know, when you were praying, Danielle, one of the thoughts that came into my head was, it's very easy, at least for me at this point in my life, to be able to determine whenever I make choices that are clearly contrary to God's will, whenever I sin, whenever I fail in ways that are demonstrably obvious. What I find more subtle and more difficult to discern sometimes is when I'm doing things that are objectively good, things that are most people would consider noble and worthy, but my motives have become somewhat corrupted. My motives have become somewhat selfish. I may be doing the right things, but I'm doing them for the wrong reasons. And we can even we have to be very careful to always be checking our motives to make sure that what we are doing for God's glory instead of for our own glory. And sometimes when it comes to our motives, those can be a little bit more difficult to discern. And we have to be always evaluating our motives. We can make a God out of our own motives, out of our own ambition, even if we're doing objectively good things. God wants us to be doing good things for the right reasons.
You're so right.
And if we're, and I think that if we can constantly be examining and purifying our motives, we will not only be more effective, but I think we'll be happier people.
Yeah. And Chris, as you were speaking just now, it brought to mind that the Spirit of God is like a two-edged sword that cuts between the bone and the marrow. And as we examine ourselves, that's fine, but we see in part and we know in part. Only God really can fully understand our hearts. And so if we allow him to examine us, then we're going to be in a lot better shape than if we try and rely on our own understanding. And, as you were also talking, while you were talking, I also thought about the fact that we can make our own piousness. We can make religion an idol. It's not about that. It's literally about just pure service to the Lord and serving him alone. And whether that looks like taking your family to the beach because everyone deserves a day off and everyone deserves some good time together, that can be an act of service to the Lord. This isn't just like, putting on your monk's robes and walking up and down the aisles of the church.
It's so true, Danielle. We make things so much more complicated sometimes than they need to be. Was it Malachi, the book of Malachi, where the Lord says, "I ask only three things of you: to love mercy, to act justly, and to walk humbly with your God." If we all strove to do that every day, just that simple formula, I think that the world would probably be a better place. But God is not complicated when it comes to His expectations of us. It's not always easy, but it's not difficult to understand what He desires from us. And He doesn't desire to hide from us. He desires to make it clear, and He has. So we just need to be simple in our approach, not pretentious, and be purifying our motives all the time, and we will continue to grow and continue to be effective. And speaking of being effective, we've had some pretty good results here lately down in the legislature, and I've been testifying a good bit down there and really been enjoying it.
Yeah, you've been doing a great job, Chris, for us, for all the listeners, for the people of the state of Louisiana. So hats off to you and a big thank you for taking the time and for really being a voice of truth and reason in a place that, let's be honest, can be lacking that on a lot of days.
Well, it is, and but we always have to find God in each moment. I think Paul said that look for God in each moment. He's present everywhere. He's always there. We just have to seek Him. There's no place where we can go. And when I'm riding down to the Capitol sometimes in the morning, Danielle, I think to myself, you know what? It's interesting. Isaiah said that you always precede us, you always go before us, and you're also the rear guard. So you've got the past covered, and you've also got the future covered. You're already there. You are present, and there's nowhere I can ever go where I can ever escape you, and that's very
Yeah.
consoling to me. And God, there are days when some people may doubt it, but God exists and is prevalent even at the Louisiana State Capitol.
Yes, and whom then shall we fear, right?
And whom then shall we fear? So I have been enjoying it, and I've been getting to know more and more of the legislators down there. And one thing I've come to realize, Danielle, is that most of them really do want to do the right thing. But they're torn in so many different directions, and there are so many temptations toward corruption or self enrichment that unless you're very, very well anchored philosophically and morally, it's just very easy to get
Yeah.
off
And
track.
Chris, the personality of a lot of politicians is that of a people pleaser. And so whenever they get into office after running for campaign, you spend the whole campaign telling people that you're going to help them in this way and that way. And then you get there and the buttons start getting pushed. And all of a sudden, there's all this pressure to appease all of these competing interests. And it's just not possible. You can't make everyone happy, and you have to be okay with that. You have to have that center, that core that says, I know who I am, I know who I'm here to serve, and no one's going to sway me from that position of essential, the essential positions. And then for the people who are able to do that, we see them consistently showing up the right way, consistently grounded, consistently taking good votes and making reasoned arguments. It's the people, I think, who are less certain of who they are, less certain of who they serve, that we're seeing a lot of volatility from.
Yes, and I'm there, and LACAG is there, becoming increasingly influential. I can humbly say that, and very gratefully say that, to remind them of who they should be serving and who they claimed that they would serve while they were running for office. And most of them, when you remind them of that, and you have the carrot and the stick, I like to call it, many of them will do what they're supposed to do. And to be honest with you, Danielle, I wish that they always acted out of the sincerest of motives. I wish when they do the right thing, I always knew that they were doing it for the right reasons. But quite frankly, I'm less concerned about why they do the right thing than that they do the right thing. And if they're doing the right thing because they don't want to have bad votes exposed to their constituents, very honestly, well, that's fine too. I just want them to make the right votes.
Exactly. And that's a great jumping off point for me to remind people to please come join Chris at the Capitol and make your voice heard, either through green cards and red cards, letting your opposition or support be known, or by testifying on legislation yourself that really matters to you. Please sign up for the action alerts at lacag.org. We promise not to fill up your inbox with emails. What I think even more importantly than signing up for the action alerts is that you bookmark the Action Center on your browser. Anytime you're waiting in line or waiting for an appointment, just go on there and take action. Set an alarm. I have heard that some people, Chris, are doing this every day. They just have it at the top of their to-do list and they're doing it every morning. They're taking action on the items that matter to them. The system's set up so that you can take an action once a day on each and every item. So, by all means do that.
Oh yeah, Tim
Yeah.
Babin. Tim Babin
Is it
is one of those, a very faithful LACAG member, and he's one of the ones who is very faithful about getting his calls to action out and making sure that the representatives know where he stands on issues. And very grateful to Tim for that. He's very, very active and is having a big, big effect on what's going on down there. Just because he takes the little simple steps every day to
yeah.
do the right thing. I have a lot of
Yeah.
respect for
Me
Tim.
too. He's a great guy. Well, Chris, should we get into what happened last week?
Let's get into it.
Okay, so yeah, we have a lot of good things to report, starting with House Bill 238 by Representative Eccles, who we're seeing a lot of great legislation from this session. His bill is about protecting Louisiana from our agricultural land being bought up by foreign adversaries. Obviously, this is a bill we've supported quite strenuously. And it passed House Appropriations unanimously last week. It passed the House 4 in an 89-7 vote. And the 7 is really the question mark, right, Chris? So let me tell everyone who the communists are that want foreign adversaries to be able to buy our agricultural land. They happen to all be Democrats, but don't worry, there's some there's still some room to criticize Republicans.
Let me tell you what, Danielle, whenever you and I talk about a piece of legislation where there's zero room to criticize any Republicans, I will know that I'm ready for the
Well, the
apocalypse.
communists are Delisha Boyd, Barbara Carpenter, Kyle Green, Mandy Landry, Tammy Phelps, Sylvia Taylor, and Matthew Willard. Now, the cowards who could not show up to vote for this very important bill, so we can almost assume that they are probably communist as well, are Timmy Chasson, Amy Freeman, Chance Henry, Jason Hughes, Edmund Jordan, Denise Marcel, Joy Walters, and two Republicans, Big John Ilg and Jeremy Lacombe. Now, Jeremy Lacombe's name has come up quite a lot in this no-show category so far this session. You're going to hear a lot more today, and Big John Ilg is also racking up those no-show points. So they're going to really have a rough scoring when it comes to our scorecard later this session or even later this week.
Danielle, what do you think? What do you think could possess a Republican? A Republican to not show up and vote on a bill like this. I understand that it was 89-7 that every Republican who voted for it, and well, they should have, because as you said, it will protect our agricultural land from countries that are trying every single day to dismantle our critical infrastructure. And so every Republican should have voted for it. But you know what? If I'm in the legislature as a Republican, I would make absolutely certain, as a matter of personal honor and pride, that I voted for this legislation. Being absent for a piece of legislation like this is just an insult. And John Ilg and Jeremy Lacombe really should be ashamed of not being there, unless there was some kind of an emergency that caused them
and
not
I'll
to
just
be there.
add to that, Chris, the fact that this was a bill that had extremely strong bipartisan support. And like I said, we're going to see a lot of Jeremy Lacombe in that no-show category today. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that a lot of
Yeah.
Democrats voted for this because most Democrats understand
Yeah.
how important it
It
is.
should be a very straightforward patriotic bill. Moving on, Chris, to House Bill 866 by Representative Amade. This one is an anti-discrimination bill, and it's about it's for people who decide not to take medical treatments, right? And they can't get discriminated against. If this bill passes and gets signed by the governor, they can't get discriminated against in any setting. Is that right?
That's right. It is a very broad-based anti-discrimination bill. No entity or agency or employer or government official can discriminate in any way against any citizen for refusing any medical procedure or protocol or device in the state of Louisiana in any way, shape, or form. It's a very good bill, very well written bill. Passed the House Civil Law 12-0, headed to the full House, and I'm very optimistic about the bill. You know, the only thing that concerns me a little bit about this is that we have the Jessica Domains in the state legislature and others of her ilk who will find some way, in all likelihood, to criticize this very good piece of legislation, to try to water it down, to try to amend it, to make it less consequential and less significant. So even with a piece of legislation like this that simply says you can't force a Louisiana citizen ever again to take some medical protocol, procedure, vaccine, or anything else ever against their will and consent, which is nothing more fundamentally pro-American than this and pro-liberty than this, they will find a way to eviscerate it. And so I hope that I am pleasantly surprised, and I hope that this passes overwhelmingly in the House, but we're going to be on guard to see which, if any, Republicans
Yeah.
try to hamstring it.
Yeah, I hope this one passes. But Chris, there's a lot of people in places of elected office that believe that they know better than the people who live in the body, who live in their own personal body.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? They know better about whether or not I need to get a medical procedure or a vaccine or wear a mask or anything else
Yeah.
more so than I do. Yeah, they know better. So, but anyway, we're going to keep a very close eye on this. And Beryl Amity is masterful when it comes to presenting her legislation. So I look forward to seeing it. So thankful and
Yeah,
happy to
me
be
too.
supporting this.
All right, we're going to trot right along because we got so much ground to cover. Next up, House Bill 844 by Neil Reiser. This would repeal the individual income tax in the state of Louisiana. Obviously, this is one that a lot of us have been waiting for. We are big supporters of it. Chris, you testified on this bill, and it was kept in the House Ways and Means Committee. Did you say there was testimony on it, or no? It had a little testimony and then got shut down.
I testified right next. I testified right next to Neil Reiser on this, and interestingly enough, the committee didn't vote on it. They didn't ask any questions. It's in the House Ways and Means, and I was like, are y'all not eagerly supportive of abolishing the individual state income tax, particularly when Representative Reiser explained that it will not require digging into the pockets of Louisiana citizens in other areas to make up the loss? There are ways to abolish the individual income tax without raising taxes in other areas. We have to get this done. We are taxed to death. Not only did the committee not vote, they didn't ask any questions on it. This is a Republican committee. Representative Emerson, who's the chairman, did say that there is a will to get this done, and that she will work with Representative Reiser to move forward and get it done. I'm at a loss as to why they didn't take any action on it in the committee. I think Representative Reiser is at a loss, but we're going to continue to move forward and push this very hard because I don't think there's anything. I think if you were to ask 10 Louisiana citizens right now, if they were in favor of abolishing the state income tax, if it meant that they weren't going to get hit anywhere else, how many of those 10, how many do you think would say absolutely 100%? Probably 10, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going
Yeah.
absolutely.
It does
so
seem like a no-brainer.
It seems like a no-brainer, but special interests are always lurking in the periphery. And I guarantee you that has something to do with this as well. But we're going to make sure that there's a strong focus on getting this done.
Next up are two bills by Representative Geymann. I hope if you did not catch our episode with him that aired on Friday, I hope that you would go back and listen to it. I think he is fascinating. He's just a gentleman and a statesman and someone who's a strong fiscal conservative and someone rightfully called him a true citizen legislator. So check out the episode with Representative Geymann. I think you'll be encouraged by it. But he brought two bills related to carbon sequestration, one that would end eminent domain and one that would create a path for industry to lease land by unitization in a similar path as oil and gas leases. Both of those bills passed. The eminent domain passed in a bipartisan 94-4 vote on the House floor, and the unitization one passed 93-5. Chris, I don't necessarily need to mention the 4 and 5 people who opposed it, but I will mention all of the people who were absent because they were absent for both of these votes, and I found that a little surprising. And they were Kim Coates, common names, Kim Coates, Paula Davis, Stephanie Hilferty, Jeremy Lacombe, Tammy Phelps, Joy Walters, and Rashid Young. So I'm not sure if they all went out for a snack together, but they were not here for both of those votes. Both both of these bills have been set on Senate order, so they should be moving to committee soon.
How many? And of those you just named, Coates, Davis, Hilferty, and Lacombe, those were all absent Republicans, right? Okay. Yeah. So these names, it's amazing. Some of these names seem to be frequently absent on some of these important bills. And just a reminder, Danielle, Geymann's bills here collectively, his eminent domain bill and his unitization bill put together, will require 75% of property owners in an affected area to approve to sign off on this carbon capture sequestration before their land can be used for carbon capture sequestration. Very, very important piece of legislation, and really a private property rights legislation. So, hopefully this will get through the Senate and get signed by the governor. And I agree with you 100% about Brett Geymann. He is a real statesman. He's also a very thoughtful legislator.
Well, next up are two more bills in the education zone. The first one is House Bill 121 by Representative Cruz related to student names and pronouns in school. They have to be signed off on by their parents if they don't want to use their given name or their birth gender. That one passed 68-30, largely in a party line vote. Chad Brown and Travis Johnson joined the Republicans in favor of this bill. Barbara Freiberg and Joe Stagney voted with the Democrats in opposition. No big shocker there. And some usual suspects were absent, including Roy Adams, Kim Coates, Vincent Cox, Paula Davis, Stephanie Hilferty, and Rashid Young.
And you're talking now about HB 121, right? Yeah, a very, very common sense but very important piece of legislation to help keep the woke, transgender, leftist, poisonous ideology out of our public schools in Louisiana. And these Republicans can't show up to vote in favor of it. It's truly unfortunate, but nonetheless, it passed.
It did. And Dodie Horton's House Bill 122 also passed. This one was about inappropriate sexual discussions at school. It passed 69-28. Roy Adams and Travis Johnson joined the Republicans in support. And a slew of people walked out on this vote too. And they were Chad Brown, Kim Coates, Vincent Cox, Paula Davis, Barbara Freiberg, Stephanie Hilferty, Jeremy Lacombe, and Rashid Young.
And of those who walked out on it, I think it's important for the listeners to know which one of those were Republicans.
Kim Coates, Vincent Cox, Paula Davis, Barbara Freiberg, Stephanie Hilferty, and quote-unquote Jeremy Lacombe.
Yeah, and this is the bill, similar, not identical, but similar to Raymond Cruz's bill but this one will keep the poisonous left woke transgender gender identity ideology out of the minds and hearts of our school students, coming from the administrators and the teachers. In light of all the garbage that's permeating schools throughout the country right now, once again, you would think these Republicans would make absolutely certain that they were there for this vote, wouldn't you? Some of these names seem to be repeated over and over again on so much of this important legislation.
Yeah, I hope their constituents are taking note. Next up, Chris, maybe I should mention that both of those, since they passed, they've been sent to the Senate, and we should be seeing those show up in committee soon as well. Probably they'll be sent to Senate Education. Next up will be the anti-squatter bills. We heard last week about House Bill 850 by Representative Mike Johnson and House Bill 895 by Rep. Chuck Owen. Both of those got pulled from the schedule, and there's only one anti-squatter bill that is moving right now, Chris, and that is House Bill 58 by Representative Bacala.
Yeah, I talked to Representative Owen the other day, and he said that both he and Representative Johnson are really kind of halting their bills because of HB 58 by Bacala, which is a very, very good bill. And what it's going to do is just add an element to the crime of simple burglary to include anytime someone is inside or on a property owner's property, whether it's commercial or residential, without consent. That will be considered another element of simple burglary. The police can be called immediately, and the person can be arrested and removed from the property immediately. I don't know that the, quote, squatting issue is as much of an epidemic in Louisiana now as it is in other parts of the country now, Danielle, but this is a good piece of preemptive legislation that will allow property owners to get squatters off of their property and out of their homes or out of their commercial businesses just as soon as they can call the police and get the police down there, and not have to go through what's called a civil eviction procedure, which can take several days to complete. So this is a good bill. I can't imagine that this bill would be vigorously opposed by anybody, even Democrats.
Yeah. Well, it passed the House 103-0. So I think you're right on that point. And then it passed Senate Judiciary C. So you're right. I don't think we should expect to see any problems with it in the full Senate. So that's great news. And Chris, I was attending a We the People Bayou community event this past week, and we had the sheriff from Terrebonne, who's a constitutional sheriff, and the chief of police from Lafourche. And both of those guys said, absolutely not. We're not tolerating this in our parishes. And so I think for constitutional sheriffs and for law enforcement, they're just not going to have it. But this bill will certainly help back them up whenever they go to enforce that.
What is it? That's very, very good to hear. And only in this day and age, Danielle, in this crazy age in which we live, would we need to pass a law that authorizes the expeditious removal of
Thank
trespassers
you.
from other people's property and other people's homes. Only in this day and age.
Yeah, because criminal trespassing should be criminal trespassing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. How many
exactly.
different ways do you need to slice it? But apparently, like you said, we do.
Yeah,
We got to slice it
but
pretty thin.
I like preemptive legislation, but I'll tell you this, Danielle, what do you think the likelihood is that somewhere in the full Senate before this legislation passes, there will possibly be a woke leftist standing up in the Senate and saying this bill is a solution in search of a problem? What do you think the likelihood is of that? I think the likelihood is pretty high, because they have still not convinced me or you that they understand the concept of preemptive legislation. I think the likelihood's pretty good. I've come to hear that. I hear it constantly at the legislature whenever a conservative brings legislation, because they can see an imminent threat that may not be present in our state yet, but is present in other states and looks like it's probably on the way here. And so they bring legislation, and the accusation is always that it's a solution in search of a problem. I never understand why they don't understand preemptive
Are
legislation
you
or the
hearing that
concept
as
of it.
much this session as you did the previous sessions, Chris? Because I feel like, honestly, what I heard, that it didn't come from the Democrats so much as it came from the rhinos, for one.
Yeah, you're right. But you notice when I said woke leftist,
Yeah.
I didn't
Well,
include a
that's
party.
true. Well, you're so right
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. So yeah, it
Woke
comes
leftism, it
from both.
transcends parties.
Transcends parties, yeah. So, but I do hear it, but I'm not hearing it quite as much, because I think they understand, because I have articulated the concept of preemptive legislation frequently down there, and other representatives have as well. So slowly but surely, that refrain is dying out. Thank God.
Great. Yeah, let's stomp it out. Okay, Chris. Next up is Senate Bill 276 by Senator, Presley, and this is his bill was brought because of the situation that happened with his sister that was so unfortunate, and unfortunately she was able to catch it in time. This is the coerced criminal abortion and attempted abortion bill. It creates the crime of those.
Yeah, and we talked about this a couple of times before. The incident involving his sister, where her spouse tried to secretly induce an abortion by secreting really abortion inducing drugs into her drinks and into her food. She caught on to it in time to save her unborn child's life. Unfortunately, the child has some developmental disabilities. She's 19 months old now. Thomas Presley obviously was very upset by this happening to his sister, understandably so. This legislation was brought in response to that, and will severely punish and criminalize any person, husband or boyfriend, that tries to secretly induce an abortion in their girlfriend or their wife. And it's just ghastly to me. I don't even understand how someone could have the mindset to allow them to do something like this. But this legislation is important and needed. And again, I don't think it will. It certainly should get through with little or no
It
controversy.
should. It passed the Senate floor this week 38-0. Chris, I meant to ask you, did his sister testify in the Senate committee?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good question. I know we put in a green card for the bill. I was testifying in another committee. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I guarantee you, whether she testified or not, I assure you that the committee members were made full aware of it
Of the
through
story.
Senator Presley,
Yeah.
of the story through Senator Presley. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, well, next up, if you guys listened last week, you knew that there were an epic number of Second Amendment related bills that were supposed to come through last week or be heard last week. A lot of them got rescheduled or moved from the calendar. So we're just going to hit the highlights of the two that moved. The first one is House Bill 498 by Representative Knox. This one was creating an entertainment zone, a quote unquote entertainment zone that would have basically been the entirety of New Orleans downtown area, I believe. And that was going to be a firearm free zone. Chris, you testified on the bill, so you can speak more effectively to this than I can.
Yeah, I testified against it. And fortunately, this one did not move because it would have created it would have made the entire city of New Orleans a gun free zone. Now, I will say this: once Representative Knox began to present his bill and we testified against the bill, he amended it to say you can carry now in New Orleans if you have a concealed carry permit. But our position is that we just passed constitutional permitless carry in the state of Louisiana. Permitless carriers have been celebrating across the state that they now do not have to go get government permission to conceal carry. And so I said, well, thank you, Representative Knox, for amending the bill, but that's not good enough. Permitless carry is the law in Louisiana now, and people should be able to permitless carry in Louisiana, in New Orleans, just as well as they can carry anywhere else if they're law-abiding citizens. So this bill would have discriminated against permitless carriers. It would have violated the Constitution. And I very passionately testified against this. Unfortunately, it was voluntarily deferred by Representative Knox, and hopefully it's not coming back. It's amazing, Danielle, how we just passed constitutional permitless concealed carry in Louisiana, codified that fundamental Second Amendment right, and already we see these efforts from various legislators to come in and eviscerate the right through these gun-free zones in Louisiana. And it's amazing how they don't understand what is hard to understand about the fact that far from creating real safety zones, all gun free zones do is create a magnet for criminals with guns who want to do people harm. And you know why? Because they know that the people in these zones have no means by which to defend themselves. What is so hard to understand that? About that. I just don't quite get it. You're making people in these gun free zones. Schools are always gun free zones. You're making the students in those situations sitting ducks, vulnerable prey for demented people with guns. I don't understand what people don't get about that.
Yeah, all the more reason for us to be extraordinarily vigilant when it comes to the Second Amendment in this state. I know that a lot of our representatives, well, a handful of our representatives are doing their level best to strengthen respect for the Second Amendment in the state. And one of those is definitely Senator Blake Miguez. He brought Senate Bill 194, and it was a preemption bill that says that state law supersedes local ordinances in terms of restrictions of gun laws. So, Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong, but local laws cannot be more strict than state law when it comes to gun ownership.
That's exactly right. And just to add to that, if there are any local or municipal laws regulating the keeping and bearing of arms in the local municipalities and areas, they have to be repealed if they are more restrictive than current state law. So it's a
Beautiful.
very good bill that Senator Miguez brought, and it's gonna help make sure that no local municipalities, if they sort of lean left and want to curtail Second Amendment rights, can't do it if this legislation passes.
Yep. And it was voted It was voted out of House Criminal Justice in a 9-4 vote along party lines, although Democrat Roy Adams joined the Republicans. And his is a name we have seen quite a lot this week joining the Republicans. So hats off to Roy Adams on not necessarily voting the party line, but voting your conscience. That's awesome.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned his name several times. If you mention his name one more time, we're going to have to reach out and have him on the State of Freedom.
Well, we'll see how it goes. I'd be happy to have him on. Okay, now there were also a giant number of constitutional amendments that we were taking a look at last week, which, if they should pass both chambers, they would be on the ballot in November. Many of those were taken off of the calendar because there was just too much on the schedule for that day. The convention to amend the Constitution, House Bill 800 by Representative Beaulieu, took up a lot of the testimony time in that hearing, and we expect a lot of those proposed constitutional amendments to be heard this week, but we have not seen those hit the calendar just yet, so we'll be keeping an eye out for those. Two bills that were heard were House Bill 48 by Representative Bacala. It was this one, Chris, was, I call it the anti-Pelosi bill. Basically, it's so you don't have to pass it before you read it to find out what's in it, right?
Well, what's in the bill exactly? All the bill would do would require that the House has at least 48 hours to review any amendments to appropriations bills that come back over to them from the Senate. They have 48 hours to review any bill that involves the spending of taxpayer money to figure out where it's going, how it's being spent, and if it involves a judicial use of our taxpayer resources. And the bill was brought to avoid a repeat of the debacle that occurred in the last hour or two of the 2023 legislative session, where the House got all of these amendments involving all this massive spending back over from the Senate 30 minutes before the session was scheduled to conclude, and they had no time to review it. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of our money that they were voting on spending, and they had no time to review where the money was going or how it was being spent. This bill was brought to so we never have to have an embarrassing situation like that ever again. It did pass, but I'm really interested, Danielle, for you to share with our listeners which Republicans voted against this very important legislation.
Well, look, this is the most head-scratching bipartisan vote I've seen all session, perhaps ever. I really don't understand it. I hope we can talk to a couple people and find out what in the heck led to this. Let me list the people who voted in support of it. So the Republicans were Mike Bayham, Les Farnham, and Rodney Shammerhorn. And then they were joined by all the Democrats: Delisha Boyd, Wilford Carter, Ed Larvadane, Rodney Lyons, and Denise Marcel and Candace Newell. Everyone who voted against it was a Republican. Beaulieu, who is, I think, a pretty fiscal conservative. So I was baffled to see that. Beth Billings, Jessica Domingue, Foy Gadberry, Polly Thomas, and John Weibel. Mark Wright was absent, and this is heading over to the House Civil Law, which I guess is where it's going because it would be a constitutional amendment. But Chris, I've been thinking about this bill, and one of my thoughts about it is, if we're going to play it real straight, it wasn't the Democrats who sent over the spending cap bust and the giant budget debacle at the end of last session. It was Republicans. So maybe the Democrats weren't very impressed with that behavior either.
It was the Republicans exactly that did that embarrassed us. Exactly. That's such a great point. The Republicans engineered this. I want to take a minute here. I think Representative Beaulieu, I'd like to find out what his explanation is for this, because he's brought some good legislation this session and has done some good things, in all fairness to him. I just don't quite understand. I don't understand this vote. On the other hand, when you look at Jessica Domingue, this is the third or fourth horrible vote that she has made. She voted against attaching the vaccine records to infant autopsies, despite the fact that since COVID, the infant mortality rate has gone up very significantly. She put an amendment on one of Kathy Edmonston's bills that basically killed the legislation and subordinated parental rights to the authority of a doctor. She voted against the gold and silver legislation in the Commerce Committee that would make gold and silver transactional currency in Louisiana. And now she's voting against a bill that simply would allow the House ample time to review and understand proposed spending of hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of our money. I don't understand it. I don't understand why she calls herself a Republican. I believe that hope springs eternal. We'll see how she votes going forward. But the pattern so far with regard to representative domain is not very auspicious, not very favorable.
It's not. And I have to say, Polly Thomas has been right there with her on several of those votes. And so I just don't know what's going on, but maybe, I won't say maybe there's a good explanation for it. I don't really feel like there is, but perhaps there is. Perhaps there is.
Well, Polly, look, in fairness to Polly Thomas, even though I agree, I've been very unimpressed with some of her votes this session. I will say that she was one of the 19 who stood against the explosion of the spending cap in 2023, which is why I have thus far tended to sort of presume in her favor, because it took a lot of courage for her to do that in 2023. And I want to give credit where credit's due. But so far, I've not been too impressed with some of these votes.
No. All right. Well, the next bill was also by Representative Bacala, House Bill 49, and this was the limited extension of regular sessions to deal with the budget. And this one was unanimously voted out of House Government and Affairs Committee with the same exact committee. The same people voted unanimously in favor of this one, but the other one, was a squeak, not exactly a squeaker, but a head scratcher.
Yeah, they vote in favor of a bill that would allow the extension by 2 days at a time of the legislative session, so they have time to review legislation if they need to when the session would otherwise be run out of time. But they vote against legislation that would specifically allow an additional 48 hours to review appropriations bills. I don't understand it. It makes no sense how you can vote for one of these and vote against the other. But maybe it makes sense in their minds somehow.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me, but it does make me wonder, even though they don't get paid very much at all for this job, perhaps they might get paid by the days and not by by the hours. So
well, you know what? That actually makes sense. Yeah.
So, all right. Next up, and the last one in our recap of last week, is Senate Bill 486 by Senator Seabaugh. This one is about discrimination on college campuses. Chris, this one, we missed this one in the lead up, but it's a fantastic bill.
Yeah, I didn't hear about this bill until the day he presented it. There's only 1,400 bills going down there. So I didn't hear about it, but I made a point to be there, and I was prepared to testify on this. Senator Seabaugh did a great job presenting this legislation in the committee. And what it does, it has to do with colleges, okay? And it prohibits any kind of unlawful discrimination or action or unlawful classification on the basis of race, color, ethnicity, origin, or sex, as I said, on college campuses. Basically, in layman's terms, this bill would penalize and allow a student who's victimized by this woke leftist diversity, equity, and inclusion, critical race theory. I'm a victim and you're an oppressor because you're white or you're male. All of that, it would put an end to that on college campuses and would allow anybody who's victimized by that kind of woke garbage ideology to bring a lawsuit for damages. And Senator Seabaugh did a very good job of presenting his bill. And because there were some issues, I think, with the legislation, they deferred the bill. But Senator Edmonds said that it will be back before the Senate Education Committee in time for it to get through. And we are going to hold him to that, because this is, Danielle, you know full well what is occurring on college campuses across Louisiana, sadly, right now, when it comes to this sort of poisonous ideology. You're an oppressor, I'm a victim, be careful what you say, be careful what you do, or you're going to be targeted, you're going to be outed, you're going to be whatever the word is, doxxed for simply speaking the truth, exercising your First Amendment right to express yourself, your views. There are only certain views, and I think only certain races and only certain genders that are really acceptable on college campuses now across the country, and certain ideologies, Danielle. It's really scary.
Well, Chris, when you think back to Senator Facey's death threat call last year around the time of the veto override session, that guy was way out of line. And he lost his job, but he wasn't kicked out of school, if I remember correctly. And I have to wonder what protected class he fell into that he was allowed to remain on campus, sending a death threat over voicemail to a sitting state senator.
I think he falls into the protected class of identifying as a leftist loon, and therefore he's in the protected class. But that's a very good example. All Senator Facey was doing was passionately supporting legislation to protect our minor children from gender mutilation. That's what he was doing in the legislation, and he gets this ferocious, angry, insulting phone call from this teacher at LSU. Very threatening. And of course, he didn't lose his, as you said, he wasn't kicked out of school, was he?
No. He got to stay in as a graduate student, I believe, but he lost his teaching job. Yeah. Not cool.
And I'll never forget, he told Facey some things that were just absolutely guttural, barely bear repeating.
Yeah. Not for prime time.
Not for prime time.
All right. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/DWalker. Get to shopping, that helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. Let's get into the week ahead because it is going to be busy, busy, busy. And Chris, you will need a new pair of shoes by the time you're done with this one. We're going to start on Monday morning in House Transportation. The first bill up is House Bill 957 by Representative Jordan. This one is one we talked about last week. It would prohibit vehicle manufacturers and distributors from sharing driver information without the driver's consent. So selling it to your insurance company, selling it to many insurance companies to help drive up your costs, selling it to used car companies, all of those kinds of companies. And I think the bill got pulled off of the committee at the last minute, or it was voluntarily deferred in committee rather, to work out hammer out some language with the car dealers.
That's exactly right. And keep in mind, Danielle, that this data that we're talking about, we're not talking about data related to car wrecks. We're not talking about data related to receiving a speeding ticket. We're talking about data that has not resulted in any actionable liability. Like if someone accelerates, faster than maybe the insurance company might think is safe, or if they have to stop suddenly. We're not talking about wrecks. We're talking about data that is deeply internal in the computer system in the vehicle that insurance companies can and will use to raise people's insurance rates very, very unfairly. And it's really private, personal data. And Edmund Jordan, even though he's really sort of, this is kind of uncharacteristic legislation for Representative Jordan, because he's not, a real guru when it comes to personal liberty and personal privacy, but I applaud him for bringing this legislation. I really do.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. And maybe when I buy a car that has a computer, this will already be law.
Exactly, exactly. And well, honestly, Danielle, there were, up until very recently, the car that I drove, it had two little holes in the floorboard, and I just ran. I just lifted it up and ran. I just ran with it. You know what I mean? So I was really doing the work. I
Yeah.
could get up to about 20 miles an hour.
All right. Now, also in-house transportation is one of the stinkiest bills that has followed us from the last session. It is Senate Bill 98 by Senator Patrick McMath, and this is the cockroach bill. It would prohibit the use of a handheld wireless cell phone by a person when they're driving a car.
Yeah, it passed out of the Senate, and I testified against this right in front of Senator McMath, because he is the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, and it was his bill. But anyway, yeah, you're exactly right. It criminalizes the talking on a handheld cell phone. If a police officer sees you talking on your phone in the car, can pull you over, ticket you, summon you to court, and it's just really, really unbelievable. Big brother government at its finest. And there is no connection. There's no study that shows any connection between talking on a phone and increased traffic accidents. This bill, Danielle, will make insurance companies money and will make the state of Louisiana more money from us. And it will infringe upon our freedom and our liberty and really treats us like children. And we're not children. And so I'm very happy to be opposing this bill. And this came last year, as I think you mentioned, and we killed it on the House floor last year. And I think it would be a good place to kill it this year.
Yeah, I think anytime, any place, we should just kill this bill. Chris, what you said just reminded me, or brought into light, the fact that there are legislators in this state who want to treat adults as children and children as adults. They're going to vote for this bill, and they're going to also vote for minors to be able to send themselves to the emergency room and say, I'd like to
Yeah.
chop off my entire hand. It's really been bothering me lately.
Yes, and we're gonna get to that bill, Dodie Horton's bill, in a minute. But that is absolutely brilliant. The point that you just made. Some of the same legislators who are going to vote to criminalize adults for talking on their phone while they're driving down the road are some of the same legislators who are going to oppose requiring parents to consent to their minor children going and getting major surgical procedures and medical treatments and health care without their parents' consent. It makes no sense, and that's a brilliant point that you make.
Well, thank
They
you,
treat
Chris.
adults like children and children like adults.
You can use that in your testimony. No
Believe me.
attribution required.
I wasn't planning on asking you, but thank you. But thank you in advance.
All right, over to House Commerce. This is a bill that I think we thought it was going to be heard last week, and then it got pushed. Anyway, it's House Bill 577 by Representative Carver, and it is related to minors and their data privacy when it comes to social media.
Yeah, you can't target minors with social media, and you can't sell the data of minors on social media. Very straightforward. HB 577. Laurie Adams with the Pelican Institute, who we've had counsel for the Pelican Institute on our show, fighting against the big federal administrative overreach to try to destroy the shrimping industry in Louisiana. We're big fans of the Pelican Institute. Laurie Adams is a lobbyist for the Pelican Institute, or the main lobbyist, and she clarified with me today that they are not opposing House Bill 577. They're following it and they're monitoring it. And I quite frankly, I would have been surprised if she said they were opposing it, because it seems very straightforward and it seems to be a good bill that protects vulnerable minors on social media.
Yeah. Okay. Over to Senate Finance. This one is very, I don't know, I was very happy to see this one when it crossed my desk this weekend. It is Senate Bill 234 by Senator Blake Miguez, who's bringing the heat big time this session. This one, Chris, basically prohibits the government from contracting with companies that discriminate against firearm and ammo industries. And I love that so much because we've seen companies like JP Morgan, a lot of these big banks have debanked the ammunition and firearm industry. I think, in fact, that may have been one of the very things that got. Someone's going to correct me. Somebody's going to correct me, but I believe that's one of the things that pushed Remington out of New York. And I want to say, well, anyway, they've moved south. I think maybe to Texas, but I could be off base on that. But the whole point is, why should we be supporting people who are against us protecting ourselves? Why should we as taxpayers be contracting with them?
Exactly, and we shouldn't be. Blake Miguez is so proactive and visionary when it comes to a number of items of legislation that he has sponsored this session. Not just relating to guns. That doesn't surprise me because he is, Blake Miguez is an expert marksman. He goes all over the world and competes in handgun competitions, and it's just it's an absolute master gun, marksman. And so, but he has also brought legislation on other issues that really rein in some of this woke investment criteria that we're seeing, this ESG stuff in our state retirement investments, which was brilliant legislation that he's bringing. And this, of course, will prevent, as you said, our state from doing business with any investment firm, any bank, any company that discriminates against firearms companies or firearms manufacturers, because in doing so, they really are curtailing and undermining the Second Amendment. And Blake is this is a great piece of legislation. And Danielle, I think, I mean, you just brought this to my attention today.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's a great piece of legislation.
it is. And, it probably bears mentioning to the listeners that we are recording this at 11 p.m. on Sunday night. We've been studying this legislation all day long, really all week long. We've been following stuff, and Chris has been testifying. But here we are burning the nearly midnight oil for you guys. So, anyway, just want to let you know that if
Well,
we're incoherent, there's a reason for it.
Well, I have to tell you, there is no one with whom I would rather burn the midnight oil than
Chris.
yours truly. And we have 55 minutes now before we get to midnight, and we will make it official if we're still online, baby. 55 minutes to go, and I'm sitting tight.
I hope we don't make it that long. I hope we can ease the listeners and just get through these bills, but we'll see. We'll see. There's plenty here.
I'm going to be thinking about certain ways to delay this. So let's continue.
Chris, I'm going to cut off your feed. All right. Next up in Senate Finance is Senate Bill 371 by Senator Barrow. And this one, I mean, I was very surprised to see this, and hey, I'm all about it. She is suggesting that people who commit sexual crimes of violence against kids under the age of 13 should have to be surgically castrated. I think that's pretty awesome. A lot of people have thought
Well,
about it. Not too many people have had the guts to bring it.
amen. And Senator Barrow, an African American Democrat, Regina Barrow, is bringing the legislation. And yes, that's exactly right. Surgical castration for anyone convicted of a sex offense as defined under Louisiana law, which includes molestation, aggravated rape, and a number of other heinous crimes. And I would be quite surprised if this does not go through. This is very important that we bring this up because it's important that there be a strong law. Now, castration, I'm not exactly sure, Danielle, because I'm not a doctor, exactly what castration entails, but I do know that it will render the offender physiologically incapable of repeating the offense.
Yeah,
Is that fair to
I
say?
think that's fair to say.
Okay. Now, because there are multiple different ways that you could render them incapable of repeating the offense, but surgical castration, I guess, would be the most humane way. Now, she does have in the bill a provision that it has to be a medical doctor has to conclude that it is, quote, medically appropriate. And I don't know exactly what that means. I think that means that the person is healthy enough to where this surgery or whatever wouldn't cause them to die or wouldn't cause major health consequences. I guess that's what the medical propriety of it means.
If you can use yourself to assault a child in that way, you can just have the surgery. That's how I feel.
Well, Danielle, there was a day when Leander Perez, who was the sheriff many, many years ago over in Plaquemines Parish, and my understanding, and I've heard through our exceedingly effective grapevine, that many, many years ago, he dispensed with due process, and offenders that fall into this category were escorted involuntarily out to the swamp where they were tied to stumps and eaten by alligators until they died. And there were very, very few instances in Plaquemines Parish of this type of crime. Now, I'm not saying that I promote this or propose this, because I do believe in due process. But people who are convicted, they should be very, very thankful that Leander Perez is not the sheriff or the DA in their parish.
Yep, and I'm not sure that I would be opposed to the due process followed by the alligator feeding. I just this is so it's such an atrocious offense that it deserves. I don't know. I don't look. I'm not really pro death penalty so much, but that this to me is like you. What else are you gonna do?
Well, let me just say this. They asked Leander Perez, what are you doing? You can't just tie these people up to stumps. And he just looked at him and said, alligators got to eat.
Okay. Well, I guess that's true. All right. Well, let's move on to the House Civil Law Committee. This one is House Bill 833 by Representative Paula Davis. She tried to bring this last week, and it was taken off the schedule, or I think it was involuntarily deferred, actually. And we thought that maybe it was dead, but she's bringing it back. I kind of, when sometimes when that happens and there doesn't appear to be a good excuse for it, I think they're icing out the people who they know are there to oppose the bill. That's what I think they're doing. So I hope that there is still a good showing that shows back up tomorrow or today when you're hearing this to oppose this bill. I really hope we see our good friend Debbie Melvin testifying against this, because she is passionate and she is so capable when it comes to testifying on behalf of the unborn.
She is. And the reason why, I mean, I'm going to presume that Representative Davis, her intentions are sincere in bringing the legislation. But if you read it, there's no question that it diminishes the dignity of the unborn. Right now in Louisiana law, the embryo is an unborn human life. There's no question about it. Her bill would make it potential human life. And that really is the heart of the matter. It does diminish the respect and the dignity that we should afford these embryos, even though we're talking about in vitro fertilization instead of the normal reproductive process. And I just think that it's a slippery slope. And I think the ultimate objective, the reason why pro-abortion organizations support this legislation and leftist ethicists, quote unquote, support it, is because it will allow them to begin the process to the extent that they're not already doing it. It will give them license to treat these embryos more like commodities to be disposed of when they're no longer useful to them, rather than treated with the dignity and the respect that they deserve. That's why I oppose the legislation, and I truly hope that it fails. And the same with Representative Marcel's bill. Even though Representative Marcel's bill is not as offensive, really, I wouldn't be disappointed if her bill failed too.
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and oppose it because it just ties in with Paula Davis's bill.
Yeah, big fat red card from LACAG on both of
There
these.
you go. Okay, next up is Senate Revenue and Fiscal Affairs. We're going to be looking at Senate Bill 221 by Senator Kathy, and this one is a very straightforward bill that's about parishes that do the work get the money back.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, Senator Kathy called me up, and I'm talking to him, and because I was going on Louisiana Watch with Duke Lowry, great conservative up in Shreveport, and so I talked to Senator Kathy and said, "Yeah, what legislation you have you want me to talk about?" He said, "Well, I have a really interesting bill, SB 221, that would, that there's a tax, $8 to $10 that the state of Louisiana gets every year from these out of state rail companies that drive all over through our state through parishes, and yet all of that tax, no matter you know where it comes from, all of that $8 to $10 million tax goes to Baton Rouge. It's not equitably distributed in the parishes based on how much rail track they have laid down." And he's like, "It's just not really fair. This money should be equitably distributed." And so that's what his bill would do. It would distribute this $8 or $10 million of tax every year to all the parishes in Louisiana based upon how much rail track they have laid down in their parishes. And yet he's expecting, believe it or not, he's expecting opposition on this in the Senate Revenue Committee tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, he shouldn't see opposition to it, but I guess it doesn't surprise me because there's a lot of greed when it comes to bringing money home to your constituents. And if you think about it, that it's not that much money in terms of the state budget, but it is that much money in terms of a parish budget. And
You better
so,
believe it.
so
Yeah, you're talking about. Let me just say this: you're talking about $400,000 or $500,000 every year going to Bossier Parish
yeah.
or to Caddo Parish every year, or to DeRidder. That's a lot of money for a small parish.
Yeah, and they deserve it. And I'd love to see more bills like this because it would, frankly, incentivize the parishes to do more in terms of economic development.
Absolutely. So I'm going to put a green card in, and if I can get in there and testify on this, I'm going to do it.
Great. Okay, next up, we already mentioned that Representative Amity's bill. Actually, I don't think we mentioned this one, so let me mention it now. House Bill 545. This is her bill that would say that create the crime of obscenity when it comes to public school libraries. And it passed out of House Criminal Justice in an 8-4 vote. Roy Adams and Pat Moore joined the Republican majority. We're hearing that name again, Chris, Roy Adams. And then Vincent Cox, a Republican, sided with the Democrats in opposing it. Rep. Debbie Villio was absent for the vote. It's scheduled for a House floor vote Monday, April 22nd.
Vincent Cox, the Republican, voted against a bill in committee that would exempt public school libraries. It would end their exemption from being criminally prosecuted for obscenity. When you look at the garbage that is in public schools now, the profanity, the books, all of the garbage, sexual garbage in the libraries, that's why she's bringing the bill. So they can't hide behind the traditional, "Oh, we're an educational institution. We're for the free flow of ideas." You can't suffocate the free flow of ideas and the exchange of books and information here. Yes, we can. And that's what she's doing. And yet we have a Republican who basically is saying, "No, we can continue to feed this garbage to our children in the public school libraries, and they don't get, and they will continue to avoid being prosecuted under the criminal obscenity statutes in Louisiana." Is that what Vincent Cox is saying?
Yeah, I think he's one of the ones that falls in that category of treating adults like children and children like adults.
Very unfortunate because Vincent Cox's name is coming up increasingly, not just on some of the stuff we're talking about tonight, but on other things as well, including, by the way, Danielle, you recall he questioned Representative Cruz on the Silver and Gold Bill 714 and joined several other Republicans, including Jessica Domain, to vote against that as well. So I just want to remind the listeners of that also.
Well, Vincent, I hope you try and start making up for some bad votes here. Okay. Next up is the Senate floor debate that's happening on Monday, and that the first one up is Senate Bill 420 by Senator Hodges, and this one is the one that creates the crime of election fraud or forgery. We talked about it pretty extensively last week. It passed 4-1 and out of committee, and all of the Republicans voted for it except for Jay Morris, who was present and did not vote, which is strange. And Blake Miguez was absent. He was probably testifying on another bill. But yeah, it's going to be debated in the Senate Monday.
Was this this was in Senate, which Jude what?
I think it was Jude C, if I recall, but I might be
Okay.
wrong on that.
No, whichever it was, I think the reason why Jay did not vote is because he's the chairman and
Okay.
of one of the committees. I think it might be, and I think that he didn't need to vote because it was clearly going to
Okay.
pass. And so sometimes the chairman don't always vote unless they need to. So
Fair enough.
anyway, I don't think there was anything nefarious on his part. But yeah, this is very important. And the reason why Senator Hodges brought this bill is to protect against illegal immigrants going in and lying about on registration applications to vote about their immigration status, and this would create a crime of forgery and fraud for doing that. And I believe, I don't know exactly what the criminal penalties are, but they are very significant. So illegal immigrants, I guarantee you, who are funded and promoted by wealthy leftists like George Soros to go in and try to register to vote, they better be on the lookout, because in the state of Louisiana, if this bill passes, they can be arrested and charged for doing it and go to prison for it.
Great. Well, thank you, Senator Hodges. We're looking forward to seeing this pass the Senate floor. We're very, very hopeful for that. Next up, that will be on the Senate floor is House Bill 162 by Representative Beaulieu. This limits the withdrawal of money. Basically, it's creating an itemization requirement for capital outlay projects. And the interesting thing about this, or the noteworthy thing about this to me, is that this will be the first bill, should it pass the Senate floor, that we have been following that will make it all the way through and be headed to the governor's desk.
Absolutely, that'll be a great day if this gets through and gets passed. And as you alluded to, Danielle, this bill simply requires legislative appropriations of taxpayer money to be individualized and itemized. Here is the appropriation, and here's where it's going, and here's what it's for. Instead of just appropriating $8 million to Webster Parish without identifying specifically what the purpose of the appropriation is. I think this is going to create more transparency, going to streamline the process, and hopefully will result in the legislators thinking more honestly and more thoroughly about how they are spending our money. So it's a very good bill, and like you said, I'll celebrate it when it gets through and passed.
Yeah. The next one is pretty huge, and I don't know if we will be the first in the country to do this, but I think this is a very much needed bill, and it's Senate Bill 436 by Senator Facey, and it would require proof of citizenship to register to vote and to vote. And Chris, you testified on this bill, and it looks like we need an amendment on it.
Yeah, testified on it. It's so important with in light of our current political climate to require any potential voter to show proof of citizenship when they show up to register to vote and when they show up to vote. Extremely important. The problem is that in the committee, because of some pressure that was put on Senator Facey, and also I think at the behest of our Secretary of State, I believe the effective date of this bill, if it is signed, will be January of 2025 instead of upon signature of the governor. And I don't understand that. This is an urgent situation in our country and our state. You know full well that illegal immigrants, again, at the behest and motivated by and funded by billionaire leftists like George Soros and others, are going to be trying to go in and vote in our elections this fall. So why would we not treat this matter as a top urgent priority and make sure we get a mechanism in place to ensure that everybody who tries to vote is a United States citizen? Why are we waiting until January of 2025? And I'm going to put that question very directly to Secretary Landry, and I am going to do all that I can do for LACAG to make sure that that amendment is stripped off and that this legislation becomes effective, implementable, and enforceable on signature of the governor. We don't have until January of 2025, Danielle, not on an issue like this.
No, we don't. This is an all hands on deck required situation. And speaking of all hands on deck, Governor Landry and a lot of good people have sent our National Guard to try and help secure the Texas border from these very people who want to vote in our elections or who are being illegally registered by the federal government in our elections or unknowingly illegally registered by our local registrars in our elections. So I would also think that Governor Landry needs to speak up. He's been a huge supporter of President Trump. President Trump has supported him. He needs to get this taken care of.
Absolutely. And our Attorney General. There is absolutely no reason why it should take, let's see, April, January, 8 months, 9 months until or longer until January of 2025 to come up with a mechanism that's not unduly burdensome, that simply allows an election officials to know for sure whether someone who's trying to vote is a United States citizen. There is no issue that is more urgently important than this one. It's like saying, my boat is sinking. I'm out in the middle of the ocean, but I'm going to wait until my boat is 2/3 underwater before I get my big bucket and start bailing water out of the boat. I'm going to wait until I'm 2/3 of the way underwater before I do that. That's what this delay is like.
Well,
that's what they're saying.
Well, Chris, what really riled me up about this is when I thought back to COVID and the fact that the federal government and the state government and a lot of local governments were able to mobilize and ensure that there was a system in place so that people who, like, for instance, if you wanted to go eat in a restaurant in New Orleans, or if you wanted to go even probably, I don't know, if you wanted to go to the DMV in New Orleans, you had to show proof of vaccination. Well, guess what? If you can do that with private organizations, why can you not, as the government, do that with your own organization with 7 months lead time on the most important issue that we're facing?
Exactly. In the most important election of our lifetime.
Yeah. Get it together.
Okay. Yeah. Get it together and get it done. There is absolutely no excuse for this type of delay on an issue this important.
Exactly.
I don't think I can say it any more or any more clearly.
Yeah. Also coming to the Senate floor, this bill, well, it may not come to the Senate floor. We'll see. It's subject to call. It's been subject to call for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks now. Senator Duplessis's SB 283, which would repeal the crime against nature by solicitation. This is gay prostitution. And we're opposed to this bill. And I believe, and Chris, I know you're in agreement with me, that it's because of the pressure of our listeners, because of the pressure of LACAG members, that this bill has not been heard yet because he doesn't have the votes.
He doesn't have the vote. And I've heard on very good authority from a couple of senators that we're very close to that they expect this to be killed on the Senate floor. Thank God. We do not need the crime against nature by solicitation crime in Louisiana being repealed. It's not the same thing as general prostitution. I believe that Senator Duplessis was not completely forthright in the committee when he made that suggestion. Bottom line is, hopefully this dies and gay sex commercial solicitation remains a crime in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have made it to Tuesday, folks. So y'all are doing a great job. Up for House floor debate on Tuesday is House Bill 813 by Representative Edmonston. And this is her off-label use bill.
Yeah, we're going to be. It's great, and it's a great bill, and it prohibits any board or commission in the state of Louisiana, and a medical board, from prohibiting any doctor from prescribing any medication that's approved by the FDA for an off-label purpose. This is what doctors are trained to do. Doctors study medications. They understand medications. They understand the combination of medications and how to prescribe medications in combination to help their patients. And doctors know how to prescribe medications for a purpose that may not be specifically approved by the FDA. It's what they do. And it's kind of unfortunate that we have to pass a law in Louisiana to keep these regulatory boards and commissions from tying doctors' hands behind their back when it comes to their prescriptive medication practices. It's ridiculous that we have to pass a law to protect doctors like this, but we do. And I'm glad that Representative Edmonston is bringing the legislation. But the fact that we have to do this is in and of itself an insult to doctors.
Yeah, it is an insult to doctors. But I mean, the state and the feds have been insulting doctors for a while now.
Yeah, I'm just warning you, Danielle, that the later it gets here, the worse my mood is likely to become. So I'm probably going to be
salty,
brutally honest, and a little salty moving forward. I will keep it between the yellow line and the ditch, but I'm not promising much beyond that.
Okay, fair enough. We're going to try and keep this moving along. House Bill 958 by Representative Amade. This one is the bill that prohibits healthcare providers from doing financial incentives to administer vaccines or taking financial incentives. Chris, explain it better than me.
Well, the bottom line is big insurance companies, big medical conglomerates cannot put pressure on healthcare providers through financial incentives to basically pressure them or encourage them to administer vaccines, and which they have done and which they will do unless it is prohibited by law, because there are a lot of people who make a lot of money the more of these vaccines are administered.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very good piece of legislation. Beryl Amadeus is always way ahead of the 8 ball on legislation like this.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And this bill passed House Insurance in a 9-8 vote that was a party line vote, except for Republican Big John Ill. Y'all have heard his name earlier in this light during today's episode. He joined the Democrats in opposing the bill. So there you have it.
Yes. Big John Ilg, with all due respect, is not only he's going to be big in two ways. He's going to be big and round, and he's going to be a big rhino if he continues this.
Big and infamous anyway. Yeah.
Big and infamous rhino. And so we're keeping an eye on John. I hope John gets it together here.
Yeah. And like I said, this is scheduled for House floor debate on Tuesday. Also scheduled for House floor debate on Tuesday is another bill by Representative Amade, House Bill 866. And we mentioned it at the top of the show. It's her anti-discrimination bill. And we're super supportive of that.
Yeah, no discrimination by anybody, any agency, any entity, any political subdivision, any employer, anywhere in the state of Louisiana against any Louisiana citizen for refusing any type of medical procedure of whatever nature or kind. A very good bill, very clean, very broad, and very critically needed.
Yeah. Well, folks, we've made it to Wednesday, so congratulations. Hang in there. There's not that much left. Okay, HCR 68 by Representative Chuck Owen. I love this bill. I love the spirit behind this bill. It requests that the Board of Regents and public post-secondary education management boards scrutinize the practice of hiring faculty from certain foreign adversaries. So, trying to keep the communists out of the school system.
Yeah, yeah, and it requests that the Board of Regents and each post secondary education management board look very closely at before they hire any faculty member from a country that is a foreign adversary of ours, as defined by our own federal government. Look, we have, as the bill itself says, we have countries that mean us harm. We have countries right now daily looking for new and different ways to dismantle our infrastructure in this country. And if you don't think that part of that process is having infiltrators come into our institutions of higher education in order to corrupt and indoctrinate our students and infiltrate us from the inside, you're kidding yourself. This resolution is critically important, and it encourages the people who are in the positions of authority to hire these faculty members, scrutinize very closely any citizen coming in from a country that hates our country before they hire them. Chuck Owen is on top of this, and it's a great, great piece of legislation. Just a great resolution.
Yeah. And Chris, as I was looking at this bill, I thought, well, we have enough communists in the country as it is. We don't really need to import new other ones that hate us from outside of the country. And maybe next year, Rep. Owen can bring a bill that asks the Board of Regents and public post-secondary education management boards to require all new hires to disavow communism. Maybe that would be a good bill.
Yeah, that would be a great bill. And then the following year, maybe he could bring a bill to abolish the Board of Regents.
They would have served their purpose at that point.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Representative Amade is getting a lot of limelight tonight. Her House Bill 908 is up next, and this one would prohibit discrimination against students, specifically students on the basis of their vaccination status.
Yeah, and it's very specific. Now, as you talked about, or maybe we mentioned earlier pre-show, if a couple of our other bills pass, for instance, HB 866, if that one passes, then that would sort of render this one moot. But this is a very, very good bill, and it prohibits discrimination against any student at school who is not vaccinated. In other words, based on where they're seated, based upon extracurricular activities, they simply can't be discriminated against in any way, shape, or form while they are at school, or distinguished in any way unfavorably from students who have been vaccinated. So HB 908, good bill. Again, if her broader bill, 866, passes, this one probably will be rendered moot. But currently, I'm glad that they're both working their way through the system.
Yeah, but you know what, Chris, the more I think about this, I like the way that this bill spells out very specifically that kids can't be discriminated against from playing in sports. They can't be discriminated against from attendance, from admission. And I just think that kids were treated so abominably during COVID that the more we spell this out for those commies who want to always come up with an excuse on how to ruin everything for kids, the better off we are.
You know what? I think the more, I tend to agree with you. The more, the better, because of the abysmal way they were treated during COVID.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Well, moving along to House and Governmental Affairs, that is also on Wednesday. This one is the bill we're going to focus on is just House Bill 800. This one is by Representative Beaulieu. We talked about it last week. His is the convention to amend the Constitution. It was heard in this committee earlier this week, but no vote happened. So we expect the vote to happen this week on that. I'm not sure why the vote didn't happen. If there's more testimony required, or what the deal is. I don't know if you have any insight
Yeah.
on that, Chris.
I don't have any insight on that specifically, but I do know that Governor Landry wants a constitutional convention. So I would imagine that this is going to work its way through successfully. Our good friend Dave Landry, who is a regular listener to the show and a faithful LACAG member, cautioned us against calling this a constitutional convention. He has suggested that we call it a convention called to amend the Constitution. And so that's the way we're going to refer to this, a convention to amend the Louisiana Constitution. From now on, I don't know whether or not there will be an actual convention. Obviously, if this passes, there will be. I don't know exactly what the nature of it will be. I don't know whether they're trying to amend the Constitution affirmatively or whether they're trying to take things out of the Constitution that shouldn't be there. But so I'm not really sure at this point how I personally feel about this. We will follow it very closely as we move along.
Yeah. And Dave's point was very, very well taken. I think his point for calling it the convention to amend the Constitution is so that we don't think that they're just ripping up the United States Constitution or conflating the state constitutional convention with a constitutional convention for the country.
For the United States Constitution,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. So, okay, next up, House Health and Welfare Committee. There's a couple bills in this one that we're following. One is huge, 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 and that is House Bill 256 by Representative Dodie Horton. It is about a minor's consent for medical procedures having to go through their parents. Imagine that.
Yeah. I think I said on the last show that Paige Lowry from Moms for Liberty is the one who pointed out to me that right now in Louisiana, I was shocked to find this out. Minors can go into medical clinics, hospitals, healthcare institutions, and get all manner of procedure, medical treatment, healthcare without informing their parents about it, without getting the parents' consent. That's a fact. She showed me the law on that. So this bill is being brought to take care of that issue and will require that no health care could be provided to any minor in the state of Louisiana without informed written parental consent, unless there is an emergency, which is defined in Louisiana law, or the treatment is for prenatal or pregnancy care. Anything other than that, parental consent, written, informed, is required. If I had told you, Danielle, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, that a minor could walk into a medical clinic and get a procedure done without having to get the authority of their parents to do it, would that have shocked you in this state?
The whole thing is shocking to me. I can't even fathom, well, I can't fathom being a child and wanting a medical procedure done. The knives are scary, scalpels are scary. But the fact that, so many of these kids are brainwashed by TikTok and other social media that these things get somehow normalized and glamorized. And it's really, really satanic, demonic, and evil. So I'm really glad that Dodie's bringing this bill to close this loophole and to make it more difficult for kids to run down a horribly wrong, potentially irreversible path.
And do not forget, Danielle, also that we live in a day and age in which the state and the government increasingly is inserting itself between parents and their children. They want to be the parent. They want to be the guardian. They want to be the authority figure. James Lindsay was, very eloquently talked to us about that when he was on the State of Freedom. And it's obvious. So when all these factors come together, I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't have a law like this. I wouldn't be surprised if we had significant numbers of minors a few years from now, so confused, so misguided, so indoctrinated that they are, in fact, seeking out these procedures and medical treatments and all manner without their parents' consent. Nothing really surprises me in this culture in which we live.
Yeah, it's crazy and it's just heartbreaking, but I'm thankful for the
I,
legislation. And
me too.
I'm really hopeful that the committee will back her up on this.
And what a warrior Representative Dodie Horton
Yes,
is.
she is. She is. Okay, next up is Senate Bill 278 by Senator Jackson. This is a bill we've been following since its inception in the Senate, and it would create the Louisiana Pregnancy and Baby Care Initiative. So it has made its way over to the House.
And I testified on this very, very happily with right there in front of Senator Jackson. And it simply will require that we use public resources to help take care of vulnerable mothers and their child until they can get on their feet and move forward.
Great. Yeah, it's a beautiful bill and much needed. Next up is Senate Bill 165 by Senator Patrick McMath. We didn't like his other bill, the cockroach, but this one we do like. It is about non-compete agreements.
Yeah, I think it's generally a good bill. There are a couple of things in there that we need to clean up. Of course, when he reached out to me earlier, he said that I was sort of misunderstanding the bill and that he's going to explain it to me tomorrow. But the bottom line is, this bill would go a long way in eliminating these non-compete agreements that hamstring doctors' ability once they leave a particular place of employment from going and starting their own practice or going and working somewhere else. So it's very, very good bill. For the most part, I will be watching this very closely tomorrow, and I will be talking with Senator McMath in the morning to clean up a couple of things in this, and maybe he can explain it to me in a way that will assuage, the few concerns that I have. But I do think it will go a long way in freeing up doctors to be able to work once they leave one job. They don't have to travel out of state to go work because of these non-compete agreements that keep them from earning a living.
Yeah. And we have finally made it to Thursday. The only committee we're going to be looking at is the House Municipal and Parochial Affairs Committee. This committee is one that I have learned not to ignore. So it doesn't seem like it's that interesting, and a lot of the legislation that comes through here is not really fit within the parameters of what we're looking at. But these three bills certainly do, and they are all related to the library system in Louisiana. Representative Jay Galley's bringing two, House Bill 640 and 907, and they're both related to library boards.
Yeah, and you remember, Danielle, a couple of years ago, there was this huge controversy out in Livingston Parish where all these books in the Livingston Parish Public Library, and I looked at some of these books, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?
They're
Do you?
disgusting.
I mean, you really think that this is appropriate for an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old? Just absolutely disgusting." And yet, the library board out there wouldn't do anything about it. They wouldn't get rid of it. They wouldn't move it. And so Representative Galley's bill will allow the governing authority in any parish to remove any library board member with or without cause. And I guarantee you he's bringing this precisely because of the inaction that too many local library parish boards showed in protecting children against this leftist smut in their library. So I applaud Representative Galley for bringing it. As you said, HB 640 and also HB 907, both very similar bills. One applies more with state entities and the other on the local level, but both very important bills, again, that will allow the unilateral removal of any library board member at the discretion and leisure of the parish president, of the municipal head. So very important to protect our children.
It is. It is. And it's sad that it's come to this, but you know what? Members of those boards need to be able to be fired by local authorities. It's shocking that that's not the case already.
Absolutely it is.
All right, the last bill up, folks, and it's a great number, House Bill 777 by Representative Dickerson, and it provides, okay, so this is basically, I think what it would do is get Louisiana's Library Association out of the American Library Association. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, the American Library Association is notoriously leftist. They are doing absolutely nothing to protect our children from this garbage that's going into the public school libraries in Louisiana. In fact, some of their spokesmen who claim censorship anytime you try to make the argument that, you know what, all we're trying to do is keep 7, 8, and 9, 10-year-old kids from seeing sexual material that is clearly not appropriate for them. So how is that unlawful censorship? But the American Library Association is a big champion that everything that you try to do is censorship when you try to protect children. So this bill would prohibit the use of any of our taxpayer money for any transaction involving the American Library Association, and it would prohibit any public official or employee in Louisiana from spending any public funds to, with, or for the American Library Association, and prohibits a public employee for receiving any money in any form for continuing education, for attending any conference if the continuing education conference was sponsored or conducted by the American Library Association. So you notice, Danielle, that public employees cannot even go to continuing education conferences that are sponsored or conducted by the American Library Association because of the garbage that the American Library Association puts out and teaches. And guess what? The fine on this, if it's violated, is not more than $1,000 or imprisonment for not more than 2 years or both.
Wow.
Now, this looks like a very good bill to me, but I will say that Ella Arsimon, who's a very close friend of ours and faithful supporter of LACAG, says she has an issue with the bill. And I wanted to say that very clearly because I respect Ella a lot. And I'm going to talk to her at some point tomorrow, get her side of this, and see, because I'm always open to suggestions by our members. And she is a very, very thoughtful supporter of LACAG. So I want to talk to her about it. And I wanted to say that. But on the face of it, it looks like a good bill.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's absolutely time to stop indoctrinating the libraries in Louisiana with this woke stuff that's coming down from the federal system. I mean, whatever federal system it is, it's most likely tainted. You can pretty much count on it.
You can pretty much count on it just as assuredly as you can count on the federal government trying to inject itself into policy and into decision making whenever federal dollars start to flow to private schools in Louisiana. Yeah, you can count on it. They never do anything. They never give money without condition, and any chance they have to inject themselves into the ideology, the curriculum, the policy of any state institution, they're always going to try to do it.
Yeah. Well, we think that we have gone through this coming week with a fine-tooth comb, and we have weeded out some bills that we are still watching just because we wanted to spare your ears and spare your heart and mind from overload. But we are following quite a few more than just the ones that we mentioned here in this episode. So stay tuned. If we see big movements on some of those other bills, we will be making you aware of them. But if there are bills that you are passionate about that we haven't caught on to, by all means, let us know, because, it really is taking all of us to make it through this session with the just incredible volume of bills that we have seen.
Yeah, and we are working very, very hard to keep you informed on the state of freedom, working very, very hard down at the legislature to make sure that your voice is heard. And it is now 9 minutes to midnight on Sunday night. We almost made it to midnight. I almost feel like starting to talk
Not letting
really,
it happen.
really slowly, Danielle, and just to start telling crazy stories just so I can get to midnight. But no, I'm not going to do that. But I do want to thank all of our State of Freedom listeners and supporters. We are just so privileged to be in the position that we are in to inform you about what is going on in our state, to elevate the cause of constitutional conservatism, to be your voice, to be really your heartbeat and your lungs and your spirit in the legislature and across the state of Louisiana. We want to be your voice, and we want to be your trusted voice. And we are gaining more and more every day. So thank you for your great support of the State of Freedom. Please continue to subscribe and share. We are becoming the voice of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, revolutionizing the way political and legislative advocacy are done in our state.
We are. And if you would like to support the State of Freedom, you can do that by visiting freedomstate.us. You can catch the episodes there. All the links to the platforms that we are on are there, or at least the big platforms. So you can find us there. If you're not sure, where all we are, you can see there. And pretty soon we will have the daily devotionals coming to the Freedom State website. So would love for you to be able to check that out there. And don't forget that you can also buy tickets to the Flynn movie if you are planning to visit one of the tour locations in person, or you can buy his DVD on our website as well. And he's also got merch and stuff like that. So we're super proud to be affiliate partners of General Flynn. And if you want to help us out too, you can do that by just buying whatever you were already going to buy through our website. And you can
Absolutely.
You can also support LACAG by visiting lacag.org. We also really, really want you to be taking action on that action center. Every single action that you take is making a difference. It's making an impact. It's making legislators sit up and take notice. I heard a statistic the other day, Chris. I don't know how true it is. At least this is on the congressional level, that for every single email that a legislator gets, they believe that it represents the voice of 180 people in their district. That's the U.S. congressional districts. So that's the power of your voice. If you want to think about the impact that has at the state level, I think it is a resounding impact. So please do make your voice known. You can do it through our website. We make it super easy for you. After you do it the first time, it should only take you 30, 40 seconds maximum to take action on any single item after that. And Chris,
and it makes, let me just say this, Danielle, and it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference when you go on and you do the calls to action. Several legislators and representatives have told us that it makes a massive difference. So please do it, because grassroots advocacy works.
Yeah, it does work.
And I want to also encourage people to go and join LACAG, Danielle, LACAG.org, $22 a month, $33 a month, one-time donation. We need your financial support so that we can continue to level the playing field in the state legislature, because of all the big corrupt special interests that are constantly trying to influence these legislators in ways that are often contrary to your interests. We do not accept any special interest donations. We accept donations and memberships only from ordinary Louisiana citizens across the state. And with many of you donating, joining as member, we are and we will level the playing field. So when we go in the legislature, they will know that we are there with the resources that we need to both praise them when they do good things and to expose them broadly when they do bad things. And none of it is cheap. It all costs money, but every dime will be spent wisely and is being spent wisely to protect you and your liberty and your freedom. So please join lacag.org, or if you want to send a donation, you can send it to P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70896. And if you do this, and if you continue to support us and continue to allow us to grow, we will continue to be the German shepherds in the state legislature. We will continue to revolutionize political advocacy in the state of Louisiana. We will continue to fight like warriors for you, and we will take grand steps each day to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to The State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.